In George Orwell's book 1984, the setting is in Oceania. With this, there is a very large abundance of information given about how Oceania's government works. There are 3 slogans the government uses. These slogans are war is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength. All 3 of these slogans can be applied to today's society. Let's start off with war is peace. This has been a phrase used by almost every war hawk you can imagine. There are 3 good examples of this today. The first example is the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Vladimir Putin described the war as protecting Russia from the West. The problem with this explanation is that it makes no sense at all. At the time, Ukraine was developing as a nation, and was very close to becoming members of both the European Union and NATO, which are both Western organizations. To make things worse for Russia, Ukraine's government was specifically a Western, anti-Russian influenced government that came about after the Revolution of Dignity. This revolution came about due to wide and strong disapproval with how much Russia was influencing the sitting government. Russia even tried to help squash the revolution on the Ukrainian government side, but there are too many revolutionaries. So now that Ukraine is a Western country, Russia believes that the only way to save itself is by invading another country. In reality, this war saves nobody and has killed hundreds of thousands of people. Not only that, but Russia has a declining population, so throwing all of your young men into a meat grinder does not save a nation, but actually puts it into a state of suicide. On the other hand, a lot of Western politicians think the best way to save lives and bring peace to Ukraine is by funding Ukraine's military to help them fight Russia while declining any proposal for a ceasefire. They have also declined negotiating how the border should be changed to where Russia, Ukrainians with Russian heritage and national pride, and Ukraine can feel as if the said border change can be both reasonable and bring stability to the region. But instead, the West is dumping investments into a losing war. Not only does this mean the war will drag on a lot longer than it should, but thousands of more people will die in the process. This also means that there are less and less Ukrainians. Russia will by default win the war by simply overwhelming a diminished army. The second example is in China. Over and over, Xi Jinping, the dictator of China, has stated that he wants to bring peace between China and Taiwan by invading the island. Like stated earlier, this makes no sense. A war with Taiwan could also bring in the United States more directly, which would make possibly the deadliest war in human history. Iran keeps saying that it is under attack from Israel, but it is important to look at a map of the Middle East and highlight all of Iran's allies versus Israel's allies. You can actually see that Iran has been surrounding Israel and terrorizing them for a very long time, but the only way Iran can justify attacking Israel and having complete dominance over the region is by saying that Israel and the United States are planning to attack Iran, and the only way to protect Iran is to bomb Israel, but not the United States. Something I do want to mention is that during Donald Trump's classified documents case, we did learn that the United States did have plans to invade Iran. What we don't know is if those invasion plans were for an offensive attack or hypothetical counteroffensive for if Iran attacked the United States. I say this because we learned that the United States had plans to invade Canada, but that obviously never happened. Another aspect to think about is if Iran knew about these documents before they were leaked or not. Either way, there is no reason for Iran to attack Israel, especially offensively. The only example of war is peace that actually makes sense is by going to war with a terrorist organization. Terrorist organizations are specifically designed to disrupt peace and stability, and eliminating an organization with those intents does actually bring peace to a region through the act of war. The second slogan, freedom is slavery, is a very interesting one to look at. Today our society has some sort of belief that mass moderation is good and brings safety and stability. This slogan is usually implied by how people criticize the First and Second Amendments. For the First Amendment, people think that freedom of speech needs to be regulated because it allows people to say mean things. Restricting people from saying mean things does have good intentions, but mean speech could very easily fall under criticism, essentially banning anyone from criticizing something that might be harmful to society. There are harsh realities like transgenderism and other sexual kinks shouldn't be taught to children, and DEI or diversity, equity, and inclusion should not be allowed because it allows companies to hire employees based on race and gender for jobs that require skill to be the main hiring focus. But those criticisms would be labeled as transphobic, racist, and sexist by people who believe that freedom of speech should be limited. For the Second Amendment, people believe that allowing people to own guns is a terrible thing. The main criticism is that guns cause mass shootings, but when looking into the issue of homicide, there are two big factors in play. The first is mental illness. According to the National Institutes of Health, 2.7% of Americans had a mental illness in 2009, but according to NAMI, 22.8% of Americans had a mental illness in 2021. That is an increase of 20.1%. Now let's look at the homicide rate. According to the FBI, the homicide rate in 2009 was 5. According to USA Facts, the homicide rate jumped to 8.2 in 2021. That is an increase of 64%. According to Vox, 38.4% of people who committed murder get away with it. This means for every 100 murders, 39 murderers get away with it and are able to kill someone again. It's almost crazy how the growth of mental illness and the percentage of murderers not identified adds up almost exactly to the growth in the homicide rate. The fact that these two issues are completely overlooked is completely insane to me. That is because the Second Amendment was meant to arm citizens to protect them from crazy people and an oppressive government. According to Reason magazine, 31% of Americans have used a gun to protect themselves or their property. With guns already being in circulation, taking guns away only disarms law-abiding citizens. What may sound crazy is that criminals break the law, and people who are out to kill someone probably don't care if they have a gun legally or illegally. Making gun ownership illegal would most likely end up in homicide rates jumping by 31%, due to people who have a strong tool of defense being disarmed. Could also end up with a very oppressive government because its people would not have the arms necessary to conduct a revolution. The last slogan is ignorance is strength. This can be used to justify how the first two slogans can stand. In a world as polarized as today, ignorance has infected open-mindedness and truth like a mind-numbing disease. When it comes to war, people will pick a side and stay on the side no matter how much proof is shown to them. They can be shown that not just the other side, but their side as well is counterproductive, and that mixing ideas from both sides would most likely draw a conclusion to a conflict. And with wanting to limit freedoms, people see one bad statistic and stick with it rather than looking into why that statistic came to be in the first place. What needs to be acknowledged is that there are more than two sides in a situation. More often in history, it is shown that the third or fourth side to a conflict has significantly better results due to them having less radical solutions.